This is the master that we used. So this comes from the ILM files for Star Tours. So being a Lucasfilm licensee, sometimes you get access to cool things like that. And what we did was we took that, and Gordon Tarpley, our mutual friend, modified it digitally. He then broke the thing up. We printed it on a Form 2 3D printer in many pieces.
Hey guys, welcome back. So I don't even know when I'll ever be able to post this, if ever, but I'm going to make this video anyway. So if you're seeing this, congratulations, I have been able to post it. Let me just put everything on the tray so you can see this ridiculous pile, okay? Here we go. This is the pile of stuff I've been printing on the Form 2 over the last few weeks. This is probably 150 hours of print time, maybe more, probably more. I should add this up and see. What I'm doing right now is trimming the parts out. You can see some of the support structures. Like this part took about 19 and a half hours to print, this one piece. You can see I've got a whole tray here full. Not all of them took that long, by the way. They're just depends on orientation, the size of the part, how many layers. There's a lot of factors. I could print this whole thing like this in one shot, but by cutting this off and lowering this down and printing both parts separately, it actually saves quite a bit of time. Every time you print a layer, the little machine has to rise up, sweep the tray, go back down. So that time adds up, and if you drop this down onto the same print bed, the lower you can make the print, it seems to save time. Of all of these parts, almost everything came out great. I had one issue right at the beginning, one of the very first prints that I did, which I made a video about. This part right here, and just this one little area right here didn't come out because the printer got some error after, I want to say, like, I don't remember, 12 hours, maybe longer. 7 minutes left in the print, and then it just stopped. So there's a little section missing. It's not a big deal in the long run. I can fix it very easily. Another thing is some of the parts, I was told that, oh, you have to UV cure all the parts with this UV cure thing. I don't think that's necessarily wrong because it definitely UV affects these. But for some of the parts, I started to put them outside in the sun for a little bit because I don't have a UV cure lamp. And I would put them out for a little bit on one side and flip it over to the other side. Well, a couple of the pieces you can see are severely warped. And I think this is from putting them outside because there's only 3 pieces like this. This one got a pretty bad warp here. This is supposed to be flat. This one got that curve that I just showed you. And this one got a pretty bad bend in it. So these 3 parts right now are printing again separately. They've been slowly getting worse since I printed them. I don't know if it's good to put them out and UV cure them without having something that does it very evenly, like one of those lamps. Honestly, on the website, I couldn't find anything about doing UV curing for all of their resins. I found it for some of the resins, but not for specifically some of their standard resins. I didn't see anything in there about UV curing them. I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't know if it hurts it or helps it. I have no idea. I'm going to look into it more, find out. The only parts that I did, I started to have issues with. So I'm going to leave those alone. But anyway, I'll be assembling these over the next few days. You can see all the little support structures I have to trim. And to trim these, it comes with these flush cutters. And basically, I started this one. I would just go in and start clipping away. The little points that actually touch the model are really, really fine. So it's very easy to undo them, and they leave almost no mark where they connected. And most of them are on the back. I've been angling the parts to get as few support structures on the front as possible, but every once in a while there will be 1 or 2 that need to be made. Like there's one here on the tube, and I mean it cuts off so easy, and it immediately leaves like a tiny little dot that you can basically take off with an X-Acto knife. But anyway, this is what's been running on the printer. So it's been printing lots and lots and lots of stuff, basically flawlessly. Printers worked amazingly well except for this one part. Everything else, 100 plus, probably close to 200 hours of printing, all gone completely smooth, which is great. And obviously, as you can see, the detail is ridiculous. It looks like a model kit right off of the printer. I haven't had to do anything to these parts. They are just awesome. Look at this back panel. How good that looks. Right off the printer. This is the medium setting, by the way, guys. This is the medium setting. I haven't even tried high res yet. This is the medium setting. So one of the things that I left out of this video, I didn't describe in detail how much work it took to clean up the 3D model. This was a model that was given to us by Industrial Light and Magic, and it was made for Star Tours, which is what Tom mentioned in that previous clip. The model came in, it rendered really, really nice right off of the bat, but the thing is, when you render something for CG, there are tricks that the computer can do to make edges that are supposed to be smooth look smooth, when in reality they're faceted mess. Like, you look close, it's pretty low resolution, but it interpolates what a curve would look like. It's called smoothing groups in 3D Studio Max, and there's different language for it in Maya and other programs. So I had to go in and remodel hundreds of pieces of this Falcon to make it printable. And not only did I have to remodel a lot of the parts to up the resolution of areas and make sure that they printed correctly, that they had enough resolution to print smoothly and not have jagged faces and so forth, I also had to go around the entire model, grab every single panel piece, every greebly that had a little detail on it. Every one of those pieces had to be touched, had to be adjusted just slightly so that it would print. Now, there's like some overall cheats that I could have done to make it faster, but it would have affected the accuracy of the model, so I didn't do that. Went around literally every panel, I would select it, hide everything else, select the faces that were supposed to be touching the main body of the Falcon, extrude them down just a hair so that they would intersect, so that they would print together, because what would happen is those pieces, they were never actually touching in the model. They were like just up against each other. So if I printed, the pieces that I didn't do that to would just fall off of the model. They would actually print as two separate parts. So the whole model, every single little detail had to be gone over probably 3 times to make sure that everything was going to work. And then I had to cut the model up into all those pieces you saw earlier. I had to make sure that all of the parts had enough thickness to print and were all watertight. And then I had to build tabs into everything. So once it was printed, they would all key back together properly. So I've seen comments on the tested video saying, oh, they just handed the model as this whoop-dee, you just print it. It was nothing like that. It literally took me probably over 3 weeks of full-time work to make that model printable. And then even after I started printing, I would catch things. I would have to make adjustments for upcoming prints to make sure stuff printed better or was more usable than some of the previous parts. So it's a lot of work on the digital side before it went to the 3D printer. So just wanted to clarify that before people type in the comments, oh, you got the model, how much work could it be? It was a ton of work. Weeks and weeks and weeks of work just on the Falcon just to get it set up just enough to print. So anyway, back to the video. So we've got the this Falcon, all these parts are roughly assembled. I have been using Bondo glazing and spot putty to fill in the seam lines to a pretty decent level. Here's the bottom half here. It's looking pretty good. And then I've got the front mandible section. I'm going to be leaving these apart because these are going off to production somewhere and they're going to have to mold these things. So I figured they're going to mold the top, the bottom, and then the mandibles, which they may actually have to separate here in the middle. I didn't fill in the seam lines, so I figured they might have to wedge an X-Acto in there and pop these 2 pieces apart and then mold the 2 halves just because of these insets. This is a tricky area to mold, so I think if they're in half, it'll make it easier. This is where it's at right now. I am going to add primer to this, and then I'm going to continue patching and add in some of the details because there are some asteroid hits and blast marks on the top of the Falcon that are actually holes and so forth in the surface. So I'm going to add those to this once I paint and finish the basic filling. So for the primer, I will be using Krylon. Krylon primer I like more than Rust-Oleum. The Rust-Oleum's a little thicker, and even though it's not technically a filler primer, it does fill in more, whereas the Krylon is very thin. So I won't lose much of this little surface detail. I have primed the bottom here. You can see it's nice and gray. Now, I have not primed the top. Now, one thing to note here is that when they are primed, it kills the... See, I got light. You can see there's a little bit of a translucency to this resin. It's pretty opaque. You can't see through it, but light comes through. And what that does is it gives you this level of subsurface scattering, which is when the light kind of goes partially through an object and it sort of bounces around inside. It's what happens to our skin, or if like you hold like a slice of an orange up to a light and you can kind of see through it, but not completely. And what's happening is the light's going in and it's bouncing off the inside of the object. Now it's very subtle here. To most people just looking at this, it seems like an opaque object, but when you get into like these little detail pieces, you can kind of see through them. When you prime the actual model here, it exposes some things that might not be quite as visible when it's not primed. Just because of that subsurface scattering, it kind of is a little distracting from what's actually happening on the surface. So, hey guys, so I'm getting ready to pack up the Millennium Falcon model. The exterior is completely primed. Most of the seams are patched. There are some areas that need to be sanded. However, I am out of time and I need to send this off in less than probably 90 minutes I have left to send this off. So I got to get it packed up. So here's the bottom and the top, and I think they look pretty damn good right now. Again, there's a little bit of touch-up work that needs to be done. I added the weathering, like the holes and stuff that are a match to the Empire Strikes Back Falcon. There's some in the top here. Another thing I did is I added to the pegs on the bottom. These pegs were initially put in for alignment so that they would just sort of meet up. You could glue them together. But I realized that they needed to plug into each other. And I actually made these round ones the size that you could use a straw and put them over the top just to hold them together to help keep them centered. So I'm going to use straws on these guys, but then I printed these triangular tubes that have a flange at one end so that it'll make it a little easier to line them up. These will slide on these pieces. I put some little tiny ones up on these guys here, and then the top pegs will plug into these and hopefully help hold it together a little bit more easily. So just a quick look, when it is pegged together, you can see inside all the pegs. I don't know if I can get some light in there, but all the pegs line up, and I'm going to tape these together, and I think it's actually going to help it maintain its shape while I go through shipping, which should be pretty good. And then we'll get this thing sent off today. Good times. This won't be fully assembled before I send it off. It's going to be partially assembled, just like this, but just fixed up. And that's it. And then it'll be out of my hands. And then when the final product is done, hopefully I'll be able to attach it right here after this video.
This is the Millennium Falcon flying through the asteroid field as a coffee table. Painted, everything is hand assembled. You know, where a lot of it's hand cast. We do use 3D printing to make the dish and the guns because you can actually get the details of them that you couldn't get molding and casting it unless it was in a million pieces.
The battle damage, the dirt, the grime, the everything you want to see in the Millennium Falcon, it essentially comes alive and just basically screams at you.
And when you say that, we're looking at a Millennium Falcon. You built this. You made this from scratch.
So right, like this isn't like a toy that we're painting in here. This isn't one of the existing models. This is actually this is the master that we used. So this comes from the ILM files for Star Tours. So being a Lucasfilm licensee, sometimes you get access to cool things like that. And what we did was we took that, and Gordon Tarpley, our mutual friend, modified it digitally. He then broke the thing up. We printed it on a Form 2 3D printer in many pieces.
I can imagine.
And then Steve here at the studio took much more time assembling it and also refining all of the details. Now that it was printed, now that we had it in physical space, that we could say like, okay, let's punch this up, let's punch that up, let's make, find a way to make this moldable.
Right, I was going to say, each one of these isn't 3D printed. You made a master 3D printing and then you made a mold of it.
So we now have a silicone and fiberglass mold of this.
May I pick this up?
Yeah.
Wow. I don't even know where you get started molding something this complex.
Well, what's interesting is we got started by removing this little piece right here because there's a deep undercut in the mandibles there. Once that piece is out of the equation, all of a sudden we could come up with a two-part mold for this, and we made the seam line right along the top edge or the bottom edge, I believe.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And you can see the edges,
thickened up the edges
just a little bit.
Yeah.
We gave them a little draft there. And the reason for that is, obviously this is not a prop replica.
Right.
This is an inspired by piece. That said, we're prop guys. We're monster makers.
We're going to get as close
We're
as
going to get as close as we
can.
can.
And somebody in your shop gets to say, every morning, oh, I'm going to go in and paint the Millennium Falcon again.
Right. Oh God.